Your friends and family are at your house, ready to surprise you for your birthday. But they are the ones who get the surprise, because you were never seen or heard from again. This is the Mysteries of Latin America podcast, where we bring you the mysteries, myths, and legends of the Latin American cultures of North, Central, and South America, with your host, Andy Colon. Today, we tell the story of Doctor Jacobo Grinberg, a renowned Mexican scientist who devoted his life to studying the human brain in less than traditional ways. On this week's podcast, we talk about Grinberg's controversial research, his groundbreaking experiments, and his mysterious disappearance. So who was Jacobo Grinberg, and what happened to him? The date was December 8, 1994. Grinberg's family got together to celebrate the famous researcher's 48th birthday in Mexico City, Mexico. But Grinberg never arrived. And when he didn't show up to his own birthday, his family immediately reported his disappearance to Mexican authorities, and the search for the doctor was on. Jacobo Grinberg was an important scientific researcher who decided to spend his life studying the human mind not long after losing his own mother to brain cancer when he was only 12 years old. He went on to study psychology, psychophysiology, known today as cognitive neuroscience, and earned his PhD studying how different stimuli affected the human brain. Grinberg was a prominent member of the Mexican neuroscience community, and he was a key part of founding neuroscience labs at several leading universities in Mexico City, and also founded the National Institute for the Study of Consciousness, funded by the National Council of Science and Technology. Grinberg did extensive research on the human brain and its capabilities, but he decided to take a decidedly alternative road, and also risked his reputation and his career by writing and researching about the brain's connection to the spirit world in the fields of meditation, astrology, witchcraft, shamanism, telepathy, and telekinesis, resulting in the publication of almost 50 books translated into at least 7 languages. Grinberg's most controversial work was on what he called the syntergic theory, where he proposed the idea that our human brain could control and manipulate the universe we live in by interacting with a neural lattice or network that controlled both time and space. His thinking was that since our brain decodes reality through our perception, then it's possible to link ourselves to this lattice work and modify time and space to our benefit. His theory used elements of quantum physics and proposed that we live in a matrix of information called the hologram, where we can interact with the reality that we perceive not just as a spectator, but as an active participant, building this reality as we need it. If anybody out there is getting Neo from Matrix vibes, you're on the right track. If a person had a high-functioning field of neurons by reaching a higher neural state, through meditation for example, then this person had the capacity to modify the hologram at will and defy the very laws of physics by traveling in time and space. From 1987 to 1994, Grinberg and his colleagues performed experiments where he used meditation to show how two people could synchronize their brains when exposed to different stimuli. These two people were hooked up to an electroencephalogram, better known as an EEG, to measure the electrical activity of their brains. They were then kept apart from each other and isolated in Faraday chambers, protective enclosures that prevent electromagnetic radiation from entering or exiting the space, and they were connected to each other only by meditation. The results? Their EEGs reacted similarly to flashes of light shown to only one of the subjects. Distances between the subjects were then increased without significantly altering the results up to a distance of over 14 meters or 45 feet. The next plan was to perform a more ambitious form of the experiment, but this time between two subjects not only in different parts of the same room, but in different parts of the world, one in India and the other in Mexico. Grinberg was never able to prove this theory to the satisfaction of the scientific community, as the genesis for his unorthodox research happened after witnessing firsthand the miraculous work of a Mexican shaman known as Pachita. Pachita was a healer and shaman who claimed to be able to heal others with her mind and even replace human organs by performing what she called psychic surgery, using nothing more than household implements and her gift of being able to manipulate and channel the energy around her. Oftentimes, she never actually touched the body of her patients. She claimed that she could commune with the spirit of the Aztec ruler Cuauhtémoc, who was her guide. We'll talk more about Pachita in depth in future episodes. Grinberg originally went to study Pachita to analyze her work and potentially debunk her as a charlatan. He came away from the experience, however, with the seeds for the idea of his syntergic theory. He incurred the disdain of members of the Mexican scientific community by daring to use the scientific method on ideas and practices that were far from orthodox for scientific research. And so much of his work was rejected by fellow scientists as biased, flawed, and fraudulent, and they called it nothing more than pseudoscience. Despite these claims of fraud, he insisted that he was very close to proving his ideas. And then he disappeared without a trace. After Grinberg's disappearance, the lab was subsequently closed, and while colleagues continued with the studies, they never reached the importance they had when Grinberg was present. This was Mexico in 1994, pre-internet, pre-social media, where traditional media like television, radio, and newspapers were often accused of colluding with a corrupt justice system and an even more corrupt government. A presidential candidate who was the favorite to win the elections was assassinated. Then the candidate who did win, Ernesto Zedillo, had to face a massive economic meltdown as the Mexican peso was about to completely fall apart only days after Grinberg's disappearance, and inflation would be on its way to over 50% later in 1995. These were chaotic times, to say the least. A police investigation would lead nowhere. A task force was put together by the Attorney General's Office of Mexico City to find Grinberg or find out what happened to him. Grinberg had told friends and family that he'd be taking a trip to Tibet at the end of 1994, so maybe he was there. Official investigations later showed that he never officially left the country or entered Nepal or any other Asian country for that matter. And let's talk a little bit about the doctor himself. Jacobo Grinberg was an introverted man, fiercely focused on his work, as his research demanded his complete attention and dedication. While his friends and family members were very concerned when he missed his birthday party, it wasn't exactly unlike Dr. Grinberg to not answer his phone or let people know he'd be away when he was working on an important project. Remember, this was before cell phones or the internet was commonplace in Mexico. However, when no one had heard from him for several days, and when higher-level Mexican authorities got involved, his disappearance took on a more serious and more ominous tone. Interviews with family members cast a dark shadow on Grinberg's second wife, Teresa. Grinberg's daughter was said to have spoken with Teresa on the day of his disappearance, but she said that he had already left for Tibet and India ahead of her. For many people, she's the main person of interest, as she was spotted cashing a large check from an unknown origin after he disappeared and removed things from the house they shared. She also allegedly called the laboratory where Grinberg worked one day after he disappeared to tell his staff that he'd be gone for a while, as he'd be going on a research trip to India to test out his theories. Grinberg's family also described Teresa as having a volatile personality, prone to violence, and that Grinberg was afraid of her, and he'd even confided to his family that he planned to leave her soon. There were rumors that Teresa was also a powerful and knowledgeable shaman in her own right. Others say she was sent to Grinberg by the CIA to keep tabs on him, and some leads point to repeated flights by Grinberg to Colorado to meet with figures who were known CIA operatives. The investigation by Mexican authorities into the case pointed out that Grinberg's computers, actual human brains, and documents were taken from his house after his disappearance and never accounted for or seen again. But these and many other leads dried up, and in 1995, Teresa also disappeared and was never seen again. So where are we now, 28 years after his disappearance? The fate of Dr. Jacobo Grinberg is still unknown. Both independent investigations and a recent documentary in 2022 by Spanish filmmaker Aida Cuellar called The Secret of Dr. Grinberg have offered theories, but no one knows or is willing to tell what really happened to Dr. Jacobo Grinberg. Some interesting theories say that the FBI or CIA made him disappear, or brought him to the US to continue to work on his research under some sort of witness protection program for scientists. Others say he was abducted by entities from the same spirit world he was trying to make contact with. Some say that in his pursuit of the truth, that he was actually able to make it outside the matrix he studied. He made it to the other side, and he couldn't or wouldn't come back. And yet another less otherworldly theory is that he was actually killed by his wife Teresa, or she arranged his death and the body was never recovered. Nothing has been proven, and the investigation, which went cold, was mysteriously closed and all but forgotten. The one thing that is true is that since his disappearance, the work of Jacobo Grinberg has continued to receive notoriety, and scientists to this day have used his research as a basis for their own work. Popular ideas like the laws of attraction and others have been influenced by the doctor's theories. So in many ways, Dr. Jacobo Grinberg, a man devoted to the study of consciousness and the human mind, lives on through the work and body of knowledge he left behind. If this mystery has entertained, enlightened, or stimulated you to learn more, make sure to subscribe to this podcast wherever you're hearing it right now, so that together we can dig deeper into the mysteries of Latin America. I'm Andy Colon. Adios.